All right. So, welcome to the Blue Swan. Today, we are very, very lucky to have BAFTA award winner and Oscar nominee Lesley Paterson on the podcast. She is a champion triathlete 5 times and won the BAFTA for producing All Is Quiet on the Western Front, which got 7 BAFTAs and 4 Oscars. And this is not including a slew of nominations.
Oh, mate, thank you so much, Sean. Yeah, what a privilege to have achieved all of that and to gone on these crazy journeys. It's quite unusual to have, a career in sport and a career in, film and television. So, I'm a person of resilience. I've failed a lot in my life to get to this point, but here we go, lots of good things happening.
All right. Very, very humble introduction. And so, every rose has its thorn, and sometimes they blossom at unorthodox times, like competing in a triathlon with one of your arms broken and an angel on your shoulder and a monkey on your back. And so I'm wondering if you'd be willing to touch on how you got noticed by Netflix during that whole extravaganza.
Yeah, so it was an interesting ride. We picked up the rights to All Quiet in the Western Front, 16 years previous, my partner and I at the time, and we adapted it into a screenplay. That took us about 2 years, not an easy book to adapt. And then we went on a crazy journey to get it off the ground. Lots of producers on and off, lots of actors on and off. And then, really at the last chance saloon, we managed to get it in the hands of Edward Berger. And, you know, prolific director, albeit not so prolific at the time, but definitely on the up and up. And he read and loved the script and came on board with his producing partner. And we took the project out to the Berlin film market. And that sort of propelled us into Netflix coming on board as an original film, funding it all and getting behind it in a very big way. So it was a super exciting time.
Thanks. And so there's some very interesting differences between venture financing and then production financing. And so I believe that the rights were acquired by Netflix for 20 million euros, which is a considerable amount for a first production. And so I'm wondering if you'd be willing to sort of touch on sort of the process of assembling and managing teams as a producer, whether
Mhm.
it's with films like All Is Quiet on the Western Front or with something like Trailblazer, where you're doing an interactive format that's more driven by graphics.
Generally, certainly because I have a production company, I tend to do more or look for more of the slate financing, where somebody's coming on board to mitigate risk and they're financing kind of the entire slate, right? And that gives you some versatility to put equity into each project or a group of projects that you see as being sort of the most marketable projects or the easiest to set up. But generally, when you're putting together a film, certainly independently anyway, you start with maybe IP. Like for All Quiet in the Western Front, it was getting the rights to the book or the option to the rights to the book. Maybe it's an article, or if not, it's just the development of a script, which is its own IP. And as a writer, that's of course what I do within my company is write and develop a lot of screenplays. And then from that point, you package the film, meaning you get talent on board, a director, various cast, and they have to be worth X amount in order to quote unquote fund a certain level of budget. So, Tom Cruise can fund a massive budget, somebody on the lesser scale, a lesser budget. And so with that package, you do things like you get a sales agent on board, you sell territories domestically and internationally, and you get money or you get a note against that. You may be shooting a country that has tax incentives and you get a cash flow on the tax incentives. And then you have an equity piece. So through all of those things, that's how you create the budget for your independent film. Maybe you have distribution before you go to camera, maybe afterwards. And then on the other side of it is setting up a project with either a streamer or a studio. So maybe you have IP and a script and you have a piece of talent attached and you take it out to the studios or you take it out to the streamers and they come on board and they fund the project. There's so many different ways to skin a cat, so to speak.
Yeah, you're not kidding, and financing agreements are a book in themselves. And so you've worked with a lot of very, very, very good producers recently. Daisy Ridley on Trailblazer, Ricky Martin on the 65th, and then Dmitry Golovko scored the composition on Better Than Yourself. I believe he was nominated for AACTA awards in sound scoring and an audio composition, which All Quiet on the Western Front also won an Oscar for in 2023. I'm wondering if you can sort of discuss team dynamics and
Mhm.
the process of piecing things together, how different personalities change the shape of the entire production, etc.
Oh, big time. And it really is led by the visionary of that project or the group of visionaries. So normally it would be a director and maybe the lead producer that have a vision for the project. And so they're really curating who they want to work with and who feels right, given what that project is and maybe previous experience with them. And so the best directors really tend to have teams that they plug and play, right? They take to each project. You only have to look at Steven Spielberg and he works with the same DP again and again and again. So as I'm building and growing in the industry, because I've only really been full time now for a few years, because after the Oscars, I retired from my athletic career and went full time into this industry. So I'm starting to collect the people that I really like working with. So heads of department and line producers and things like that really are collaborative, but at the same time have their own unique skills to elevate any project.
There's more than one way to the top, and it's not a ladder, it's a cargo net. When training for something like a triathlon or something else, it could be one-arm push-ups, it could be forward and backward folding in the splits, you're looking at a multi-year-long training process to get to the point of capability, and then you're looking at a separate process for maintenance and everything else. And so I'm wondering if you can touch on the mentality the training process gave you and how that helped you endure the 15-year process of holding on to the option for the screenplay, and then how that translated to any kind of training cycles you maintained as a professional triathlete.
Gosh, you're right. That was my husband's favorite comment, the cargo net. And I think that when you grow up in a system like I did, I grew up in the UK that has lottery funding and government funding to support Olympic athletes or athletes that want to go to the Olympics. There's a very specific system in place. There's certain coaches, there's certain philosophies. And when you're younger, you don't really know to question. So I find myself in a system both of testing and of training that didn't really cater to who I am emotionally as a person. And it wasn't until I met my husband, a psychologist, and we moved out to America that I was introduced to lots of different styles of training. And I thought, who am I as a person? How does my brain tick? How can I start to create a program for myself that works on my weaknesses, but also supports my strengths? So, in that regard, you really have to know yourself and you really need to understand the landscape of training. And I think that's where the creativity merges with the sort of science based, right? My creativity in art and screenwriting and film mixed with my strategic thinking. I'm an N of one, and yet a lot of training programs are very generic. So I think I've taken that philosophy into everything that I've done. The very fact that I funded the optioning of the rights to the book every year with my race winnings speaks to that. Most people say never invest your own money. If I don't believe in it, how can I ask someone else to believe in it? I think I'm building relationships in the business that are really, really wonderful, where people are betting on me as a person, not just an individual project.
You've had a rapid trajectory since 2023. I think most people would have been considering themselves fortunate to work with the likes of Daisy Ridley and Ricky Martin after production skyrockets like that. There are a bunch of startup founders who've raised from 60 million to hundreds of millions who were also rugby players that were on this podcast. I have to know how you think that pertains to management. There are a lot of people who do rugby in startups, but I have yet to meet people who played football.
That is so interesting. I've never heard that before. And of course, but I was a rugby player when I was younger. So I was the only girl on an all boys team, and that was my first sport. So I played for 5 years and toured the country. I think for me, what drew me to that sport was this gritty determination. When you get knocked down, you get back up. It's a very primal sport. And by that, I mean you're in the dirt, you're in the mud. You feel like a warrior in terms of how you're fighting, but you can only succeed if you work with a team. I think that that's where it gives founders and entrepreneurs this step up because you have a fight in you, which is what you need. You get up every time you're knocked down, which is what you need, but you understand how to utilize a team to move you further down the pitch, closer to your goal. Honestly, it makes perfect sense to me.
Football is also more of an organized game. And so you've got a lot of play-by-plays, but for rugby,
It's
you know,
fluid.
so is the entrepreneurial process.
Right, that's a great point. Yeah, because you're interpreting, second by second, and you're changing, direction based upon the information you're given right there.
As you're launching your own production companies, how has stacking timelines between all of the various formats, between the shorts, the interactive formats, you've done movies, each one of these is going to have a profoundly different set of timelines and staff and potentially financing structure, and you have to manage each one subsequently as one is completed and the other one is yet to begin. Can you talk a little bit about juggling that and how that's leading you towards your goals at present day?
I think you have to be a good code switcher. By that, I mean jumping from thing to thing and being very present with who you're supposed to be in that moment. So I wrote a book with my husband called The Brave Athlete, Calm the F Down and Rise to the Occasion. And it's a brain mental model about why we have thoughts and feelings that we don't want. And within this book, there's a chapter on creating an alter ego. And it's something that I did as a performer. I felt like I needed to step into the shoes of a character, embody a character in order to achieve something. So when you get very good at that, it's like putting on and off your mask. So that gives you a certain skill set. That's how I'm able to code switch from being a writer, being in different stories, then being a producer, then being an entrepreneur, then being a leader, then being a manager. So it's just very quickly knowing in any given moment what your role needs to be and being able to facilitate that. My ability to cope with volume was my biggest asset. So my capacity to do a lot back to back to back and to keep going is this skill, I think, that I can feel and see where all the pieces need to be for this vision to be executed on.
Throughout this process, love has been the most powerful driving force. I'm wondering if you can touch on how that's helped you navigate what is the correct path and how to choose that within both being a triathlete and a producer.
I think it's not overthinking, it's going with intuition and your gut and not being scared to fail. And that's where love comes in. I've been very fortunate in my life that I've had unconditional love my whole life. My parents were incredible. They were hard on us as kids in terms of strict, but they were there no matter what, and they did a lot for us. So that gives you this place of stability to be able to go out and fail because you've got somebody to catch you. I married a wonderful guy. That's kind of been the basis of my philosophy, and I think it keeps me centered on what I'm attracted to as both a writer and a producer. The types of projects that allow me to have incredible experiences with others, to collaborate with amazing people.
What's happening behind the scenes with your own production company? You've rolled out maybe 6 to 8 different productions within the last 2 years.
So I have my own company called Brave Art Entertainment. Thus far, we have about 30 different projects across television and film. Unfortunately, after the Oscars, I lost my husband to cancer. So I'm kind of building my empowerment from that journey. I'm building a great team, and what we do is we develop the IP and then we package it, we raise finance for it, we get great partners and distributors for it and get it into production. But we're really looking and building the company in a way that is about a 360 approach to content. So lots of different types of content, building out a YouTube platform for shorter form content, building out obviously feature films and television series, scripted and unscripted. But at the heart of it, at the core of it, every story is about going against the grain. It's about the underdog. It's about resilience. That's the essence of my brand. They want to bet on me. You know, every year we had to pay for the option to the rights of the book. And that was a lot of money for myself. I didn't have it often, and I would use my race winnings to fund it. And one year I didn't have enough money to maintain the rights to the book, so we were going to lose it. So I flew out to Costa Rica that had the exact prize money to maintain the option. And I went out to that race to hopefully win it and keep it the option. But the day before the race, I fell off my bike and broke my shoulder. And I was like, oh my God, what am I going to do? My husband, being a sports psychologist, we broke the race down. And we realized that I could actually ride my bike if I held on with one hand and I walked down the descents because it was mountain biking. I could run if I held my shoulder and just kind of ran without much arm movement. But swimming, not a hope in hell. Because I hadn't been a good swimmer in my career, I did a lot of one arm drills. You know, often in swimming, you break down the stroke. I'm just going to do the swim with one arm. And so I did a mile swim in the ocean with one arm, came out 12 minutes down, rode into second, holding on with one hand, ran into first, won the race, kept the option. And then before I knew it, I was at the Oscars and Tom Cruise came up and spoke to me and said, I know your story. I think that's a testament to my kind of attitude, my kind of resilience. I'm just never going to give up.
It truly is Braveheart Productions. That is legendary. It wasn't painful. I mean, like
Yeah,
you're
it was
especially the
very effing
swimming.
painful. Yeah. I mean, I swam with the other arm by my side. I took a bunch of painkillers, but oh yeah, it's brutal. You know, you just break it down. You say, can I get to the first buoy in the swim? Okay, I've gotten to the first buoy. Can I get to the next one? And, you know, that's the beauty of how the brain works. If we break it down enough and we segment, you get that hit of dopamine every time you achieve something, and that drives motivation. So, you know, I know all these little hacks because of my husband and the book that we wrote. If you can use every skill, every experience, every obstacle that you've overcome and just build on that for the next one, it's amazing what you can achieve.
I'm sorry to hear about that happened directly after the Oscars. Do you mind if I ask about balance and life effects of pushing too hard? I got diagnosed with cancer right around the time I was in the middle of exit negotiations. If you are open to discussing, I would love the opportunity to touch on it, but this is really touchy.
I mean, I'll be honest, I like to talk about it, and the reason being is we're all going to face something. So if I can, you know, connect with somebody that's listening and give them hope, you know, that's my biggest goal. And in fact, we made a documentary of the journey that will come out next year. Viktor Frankl's philosophy is suffering ceases to be suffering if you give it meaning. By talking about it, I can give meaning to Simon's suffering because he suffered so greatly. It was just absolutely brutal, the pain he went through. Balance, I don't think I've ever been a person of balance. And this has almost escalated that because I feel like I push to extremes almost because I've lived in extremes. What I seek now is deep relationships and profound connections with other humans. And that's what losing somebody gives you. You've taken them on this journey to wherever they're going, and you've loved them as much as you can. And then I think it just opens up your eyes, right, to a different way to look at life and the world and what it means. So, in that regard, I'd say I'm probably about as unbalanced as you could possibly be right now. I'm working 24/7, but I'm doing something I truly love. I feel like I have a mission. Simon passing away, I feel like he's guiding me in some senses to fulfill that mission, which is to impact other people with the stories I tell. Because every story says something about society, about the world, about people, and therefore hopefully make people question and think. It's been an interesting journey, but it's been very enlightening. It's been tragic, but it's also been beautiful.
The journey to achieving something incredible is often a very, very bittersweet symphony. It's an all too human experience, and I appreciate the openness with.
To any listeners that want to reach out, you know, I am doing a raise for the company. I'm always game to have a chat about a new idea.
Thanks. It was wonderful having you, and this was a lot of fun. It was an emotional roller coaster, but a hell of a ride.
And listen, how are you doing, Sean? How is your body treating you?
Getting diagnosed with cancer pushed me to get in the best shape of my entire life. Honestly, it was a mix of stress and fear of death. And so it's like I train as incredibly hard as I can, and 5 year process. It's kind of ironic in that regard. So year 4 of 5 active surveillance. And so the chances of surgery or chemotherapy additional is low. I think I finally reached a point where it's the thought of if I push myself too hard in this moment, I could wind up in an operating room. It's no longer with me.
If you can release that fear, that's going to help your body. Your brain has a funny way of sending those messages to your physicality, to your cells. And so the more light that you're feeling, the better your body's going to be, right? I think it's just being mindful, isn't it, of having other things in your life that give you joy and hope.
That and the martial arts and the yoga. I've been doing them since I was about 6. And so I think that my parents basically trained me to just work out like that whenever I could need to de-stress.
It's cool what you're doing with your podcast, and you should have a round table.
I would be happy to do that. Awesome.
Excellent. Yeah, let's organize it. I'm game.
You're the best.
Oh, well, it's been a pleasure speaking to you, and yeah, excited to hear it when it comes out. Let me know how I can help.
Thank you so much.
Awesome.